Spurs end Chelsea's winning run. 5 was on the spin, up to third, above Man City and Arsenal, and just 7 points off the top. Back in a title race? This is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Tottenham,
Hi guys, welcome back for another hour of talking all things Tottenham Hotspur. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Acast and get every new episode direct as it's released. You can of course follow us across all social media platforms. We're on Twitter and Instagram at e_Spurs. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/e-Spurs page. We're also on YouTube, Pinterest, Tumblr the lot, and for all the links to all e-Spurs platforms, just head to our website, which is www.espurs.blogspot.co.uk. On the e-Spurs podcast tonight, we'll be talking about that fantastic 2-0 win over Chelsea at White Hart Lane last night, which proved to be the end of Chelsea's winning run. We'll be, as always, taking your questions and any questions you have for the Aston Villa game coming up this weekend in the FA Cup. And finally, we'll be previewing the FA Cup game against Aston Villa this week. So, before we go ahead with the show, let's introduce tonight's panel that will be taking us through the next hour of talking all things Tottenham. It's Jason.
Evening, mate. Obviously, last night was a cracker.
It was indeed. And Ian.
I'm still having to peel myself off the ceiling.
Yeah, no, likewise. I'm sure the next hour is going to be a very, very, very positive show. So, what a win last night was. The end of Chelsea's winning run. 5 on the spin for Tottenham. Right back in this supposed title race that people dare to talk about. We'll come to you first, Jace. Do you feel that performance was indicative of what Mauricio Pochettino has brought to Spurs? A real collective team display and simply faultless?
I thought it was probably one of our best performances under him, if not our best, in the sense that, you know, I've talked about game craft and game intelligence, and I thought we saw that in abundance. And we almost did to Chelsea what they've always been able to do to us. We punished every single little mistake they made. We never allowed them to get a hold on the game, and we kind of strangled the life out of them. I mean, the 5-3 game that I actually saw back yesterday before the evening game, I mean, that 5-3 game could have easily gone any way that night because Chelsea had a lot of chances. Hazard had a terrific game. And so, you know, we played some fantastic football that night, but the result could have been different. But last night, I thought we had control of the game, other than perhaps a little few minutes after half-time. But then as soon as we got that second goal, Chelsea didn't really threaten us at all. I thought, you know, very disappointed with what they had if they were the league leaders. And no, it was excellent. Our game management and our game craft and the intelligence. I think we made 2 tiny mistakes, which was one, Danny Rose ball infield in the first half, just outside our box, went straight to a blue shirt. But we soon recovered from that. And then I thought also Danny Rose conceded one needless corner when you know, he could have easily probably taken the ball down and got it out for a throw. But that's not particularly picking on Danny Rose either. It was excellent performance all round.
It was indeed. It really, really was. I have to ask you, Jason, I'm hearing this a lot today that, you know, Chelsea didn't really turn up for the second half, didn't really turn up overall. Do you not think that was also down to Spurs' tactics throughout the game? Was it not a case that we stopped them playing as opposed to Chelsea being quite poor? Because I think looking at that first half, before Ali scored, to me it seemed like quite an even game. There wasn't much in it. And the goal before half-time, naturally, it always seems to be the boost for the team. Would you not agree that Spurs really kind of imposed their game on Chelsea and stopped them playing?
Absolutely, we did. And as I said, we strangled the life out of them. But in terms of the tactical thing, I think you know my position on this. It doesn't matter what the tactical plan sometimes is. Players still have to do the jobs. And, you know, if Eden Hazard takes that chance in the 5th minute, it's an entirely different game. And if that's the only goal of the game, everyone today would be saying Conte got his tactics spot on and he outwitted Pochettino. No, we strangled the life out of them. And as I said, the biggest compliment I can pay to us is that we out-Chelsea. And I think in that game, you really have to have everything in your head and you have to use your brain properly.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It was a fantastic performance. Ian, coming to you, I have to say a couple of guys that stood out last night for me was Victor Wanyama, who a lot of people spoke about Kante last season, and now obviously he was the player pivotal for Leicester winning the league, and again has been indicative to why Chelsea have gone on this unbeaten run before Spurs stopped them last night. Just how well did Wanyama play last night?
I think he was absolutely immense, Rick. I think that, he did everything that was asked from him. He screened the back three perfectly. He never gave Kante a sniff. When Chelsea did break, or if Matic was coming, Wanyama just strode out, intercepted, tackled, and then did what all good defensive midfield players are supposed to do, and gave it to someone else. And I thought that the person that scores the goals, and they're two quality headers, don't get me wrong, but that person's always going to be the man of the match. But for me, in the stadium, I would have, I was very close to giving my man of the match to Wanyama because of his imperious performance on the night. It was brilliant.
It was indeed, and unbelievable when you think we got him for 13 million. I mean, it's an absolute steal from Daniel Levy, and a player that Pochettino obviously knew quite well, having coached him at Southampton. The other player I wanted to ask you about, Ian, that has had criticism on the past in the pod and seems to now be stringing together a consistent run of performances, is Christian Eriksen. 2 assists last night, 2 stunning crosses. Yes, Ali was free for the goals, and he wasn't really challenged to score the headers, but has Christian Eriksen finally found what we would call that lockpicker mentality now? Can he continue to carry on with his form? Because when he's on his day, as we know, there's not many better number 10s out there than Christian Eriksen in the Premier League.
If you look at the 2 crosses for the 2 goals, they're almost laser guided onto Dele Alli's head, and I know Dele has to do a lot of decent movement to get on the end of them, but I've just seen the cross for the second goal. That is an absolutely brilliant cross. He gets the ball from Walker. He puts it in a position where it's sort of almost over and behind the defence, but further enough in front of the keeper for the keeper not to want to come out for it. And of course, Dele does what he's become brilliantly adept at doing, and that's putting the ball in the back of the net. To get what was that? 7 goals in 7 goals in 5 games or something?
6 goals in his last 3
6
games.
in 3.
Yeah, 6
yeah.
in 3.
So, but to answer the next part of your question about Christian Eriksen, I'm thinking, over the last 4 games, he has slowly contributed more to each one of those games, and I'm hopeful that in the next league game, which I need to remind everybody, I believe is against our old nemesis West Brom, he's going to have to, he's going to have to step up again and unlock what is going to be quite a tight and well organised team. So the signs so far are good. That he's coming back to something near his best, and let's hope that winning is a habit and it breeds confidence, and he can go on and do it for us on a more regular basis. Because going back to last night's game, he had a shot in the first half that when you look at it from one of the angles, it just starts to drift wide just at the wrong moment as far as we're concerned from Courtois' sort of right hand post. So no, I'm more than happy with where Christian Eriksen's going. I think that we are now starting to see the player that we've all come to love over the last season or so.
No, I completely agree. There's definitely, like I say, Eriksen, since signing this new contract, it definitely seems to have given him a bit of a boost. Where we was concerned he may be fading off, he definitely in recent weeks has picked up the form we so hoped he would, and we're now really coming towards this business end of the season now. And you look at it coming into kind of January, February, where the Europa League is going to start kicking in for Spurs. They're going to have to start managing again that midweek fixture along with the Sunday. Jace, we haven't really touched upon him yet, Dele Alli, the 2 goals. I mean, there's some fantastic stats out there at the moment where Spurs haven't lost a Premier League game, which Ali has scored. That's 16 games, winning 12 during 4. Last night he became the first midfielder in Premier League history to score 3 consecutive braces. He's now scored 10 Premier League goals in 2016-17, the same he managed in the whole of last season. 6 goals in his last 3 games. Just how good is this guy? And the question I think a lot of Tottenham fans may be asking is, can we keep hold of him and match his ambitions for the future? We know he's just signed a new deal, but realistically moving forward, how long can we keep him for?
Well, in terms of how good he can be, I wrote a piece for the e-Spurs website, which was before the Chelsea game, and I said, I think he'll be our best ever attacking midfield player since not better than since Glenn Hoddle. By the time he finishes with Tottenham, the impact he'll have had with us will be better than Gazza's impact, and will actually even be better than Bale's. I'm not saying he'll be the superstar that will win Champions League medals that Gareth Bale do, but I'm talking about the impact that he's had at Tottenham. And looking back at Gazza and Bale, they were 2 tremendous players, really, really special players. And I'm certainly not ever going to put their efforts at Tottenham down. But when I compare what Ali's achieved over his first 50 games to what Gazza and Gareth Bale did, people forget for the first 60, 65 games of Gareth Bale's Tottenham career, he appeared to be going nowhere and was almost pushed out the door. And had Benny not gone to the African Cup of Nations, his Spurs career would have finished at 60 games, having gone out to Birmingham or Notts Forest or wherever he was going to. And it was his 6th season that Gareth Bale became that superstar. Dele Alli's into a season and a half. So for me, he's an incredibly special player. Totally different player to Bale, totally different player to Gascoigne, but he has that cocky confidence that Gascoigne has, and he just has that real coolness and composure that we now see from Bale on a regular basis. In terms of how long we can keep him, he is definitely a player like Bale that will want to be challenging for the major runners in the game, and so that's going to be a key. I think he signed that contract. If we're abundantly or blatantly truthful about it, he'll probably need another one at the end of the season, because I think it will almost certainly win the Young Player of the Year award again this year. And when you look at the contracts that have been awarded to the other players, they're all at significantly lower ways, and Dele Alli's 50 grand a week. So he's again probably about the lowest paid of our genuine first team players. That's got to change. He'll have to be on a wage like Harry Kane, and I'm sure we'll get all summer Tottenham's contract talks and standoffs, and this club wants him and that club wants him. But I think the main thing is he wants at the moment to be at Tottenham, and I certainly think that for the next 2 years at least that he'll be around Tottenham, and it's up to us to make sure that we maximise his potential over those 2 years.
No, I completely agree with you. And the fact where Spurs are at the moment, how significant that win was last night, and it really does bring in not only just us, but the rest of the teams into the pack. 7 points, it can be made up. The question will be is how will Chelsea respond to that defeat, because they are no getting away from it. They are a different team to the one that did capitulate against Arsenal during the early part of the season. They do seem to have moved on in terms of a system, in terms of a side that do grind out results. It will be about how they react and how obviously the rest of the league react. Spurs have got a huge game next, looking ahead in the Premier League to West Brom. I'm sure many people will think, well, the last time Spurs got a victory of this nature was against Manchester City, and then after that we just couldn't go on a run after that. That just seemed to, for whatever reason, stop us and put us in a bit of a rut. So obviously it's great winning last night, but the most important thing is obviously to win and then carry on that kind of form, because if we don't get a result against West Brom, then the great work we've done against Chelsea last night in a way kind of goes to waste. So it is very much about trying to take this win, use it as a foundation, and now carry on what's been, like I say, 5 wins on the spin. It's been a super period for Spurs. It really, really has. And I have to come to you next, Ian. Kane, Ali, both on 10 goals already this season. Son has chipped in with 6. Eriksen has 5. This Spurs side, we're not just reliant on one man, are we? This is very much a kind of team, collective spirit that Spurs seem to be coming through now on a regular basis, year upon year. What has Pochettino brought to this Tottenham team? They seem to be at the moment going through walls for each other. It's a young, fearless team, what I said last night. Would you go along with that?
It's getting to the stage where I'm thinking of asking for some space in that cupboard of yours from last year. Because those sort of stats that you've just provided us with, and that spread of goals around the team, can I whisper it? That's the sort of stuff that titles are won on.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be listeners out there who can name me many situations, but in most cases, titles are won by teams who can share the goals out, and they can get a goal from any part of the team. I don't recall. I know there's been some exceptions. I should have thought, but you don't have a situation where somebody scores 30 odd goals and wins a title for the team outright, unless you guys can put me right. So there's that one there. As for what Pochettino has done, I just look at his man management, and being a manager myself, it's lovely to see what he obviously does. He's obviously quite ruthless with those that aren't cutting the mustard.
I.e. Sissoko, which we see Ian, and the way
Exactly.
he's bounced back as a player and he's taken the criticism on board. So yeah, I mean, it really is, like I say. And I have to say, Ian, one thing that made me chuckle last night is Pochettino. He's outwitted both Guardiola and Conte at home now at White Hart Lane. There was murmurings at the start of the season whether some were asking, with that kind of 1 win in 10, whether this guy was still the right man for Tottenham. I mean, I got at the time I was chuckling. I thought how ludicrous it was. Does that even now, on the basis of last night, that performance just show sometimes how maybe fickle the game can be and how lucky we are to have a manager of such class?
And I think also what I noticed yesterday was and we saw it at Man City last season, where he obviously has a real bond with this group of players. He was there on the touchline and he shook everybody's hand as they come through. And I thought it was even telling that quite a few of the Chelsea players, got a handshake from him, which proves how much that he treats players with respect who are prepared to put in the effort. And and I think that those people who perhaps might have been doubting his brilliance, let's call it brilliance, in moulding a squad. We've had some pretty sort of lean times, and I've had some pretty sort of nondescript managers. I always remember the chap who turned up with the blooming, Christian Gross with his flipping Oyster card. You think, mate, I hope you still kept that Oyster card. But
I mean, naturally, the game the way it is now, Spurs are expected to challenge for that top four and for the top, and for the title because of last season. But again, I have to say, even last night, I'm looking at it. I'm going to come to you, Jace. I really have to ask this because it fascinates me that Spurs are above a Man City there. They've still yet to be able to field really their best possible 11. When you look at last season, the spine, for example, you look back even at Lloris, Rose, Alderweireld, Vertonghen, Dembele, Kane, Lamela. We've still not been able to field that team yet. And even still, last night was only the third time this season that we've been able to field Lloris, Alderweireld, Dembele and Kane on the same pitch. So that in itself tells you that we haven't really had all the options available to us in terms of a best team yet.
Yeah, and I think, you look at that and we're constantly told by critics that our squad's not deep enough or good enough. And yet, as you say, there we are in third position, having not hardly been able to field the spine, and we're still missing Lamela to a degree as well. I think I said after that Manchester City game that I wasn't surprised that where we beat Manchester City. Let's remember they came to Tottenham with a 100% record, didn't they? Or was it 5 or 6 wins straight on the bounce?
Yep.
And we picked them apart and totally deserved it, just as we did Chelsea last night. And I remember saying after that game, nothing that I saw in that game surprised me. We are a seriously good side. And I think, there are a lot of journalists, pundits, whatever, that don't seem to realise just how good we are. The one thing that we have to prove is that we don't bottle the big occasion, and we do get across the line, and that's why talk of trophies and that is so important. But I'm absolutely delighted with where Tottenham are, both as a club, both in the table, the way that the whole club is run at the moment from top to bottom is excellent.
I mean, I've got to say, lads, just in general at the moment, that I can't remember ever saying in my lifetime that as a Spurs fan that I wouldn't swap our best available 11 for anyone in the Premier League. When you look at the actual teams out there, the 11 selected on the pitch, would you both go along that lines? Ian, would you say, do you look at any other team and think they are stronger than Spurs as a whole? or would you go along the lines of that you feel Spurs as a group, as a unit, have the strongest available 11 in the Premier League to field?
No, I just think, and you know, I'm sure that there might be a question raised later on, which might ask about, you know, would we want any other player in your team? And I wouldn't swap any of them. I might have some that might provide greater depth in cover.
Squad, yeah.
Yeah. But you know, with the exception of Lamela, last night I thought the tactics and the personnel were spot on. You know, if you were going to pick a player to do a job of work, and you were to use his skills to get the best out of it for the whole, we saw that last night, and I don't think there's any sort of player that I've seen in travels that could have done a better job than Danny Rose, or could have done a better job than Wanyama, or you know, a better job than Dele Alli. So, you know, I just think, you know, last night for me was almost perfection, and I'm sure that's going to cause a load of
I don't think you're far off here. Jace, just finally coming to you. I'm looking at this squad now. It's an average age of 25 years. Only 3 players over the age of 27. The nucleus of a young team that just seems to be growing together as one. I hate this. I mean, I'm looking at this squad, Jason. I'm thinking that really, for me personally, we are, I would think, just a couple of tweaks away squad-wise from being seriously up there to challenge for the title. Would you go alongside that, or do you think that the squad we've got at the moment, in your opinion, still remains, you know, good enough to really compete for this league?
I think the squad we've got at the moment is certainly good enough to compete seriously for a top 4 place and be on the fringes of a title race. Whether we can still go on to win it, I think, you know, the key thing is that bottle and the brain when we come under that real high pressure. You know, the last 4 games of the season, we got Man United home and Arsenal at home, and if we're still in the race, we have to really crank it up in those 2 games. But you know, the longer the squad's together, the more we have a result like last night, the more the belief and the confidence will grow, and that can only be good for the club. Can I just say on last night, I've seen lots of comments today from Chelsea saying that, you know, our celebrations were ridiculous at the end just because we stopped them breaking the record. I've never seen so much rubbish in my life. We actually celebrated last night because we won the game. We celebrated because it's 5 wins on the bounce for us. We celebrated last because we beat a London rival. We celebrated last night because they were top of the league. You know, everything about our celebrations was what it meant to us last night. Yeah. We were the side that had the pressure on us. We conquered that pressure. We won the game. What we didn't do was celebrate a 2-2 draw like they did that stopped them getting the record. You know, there's 2 big differences in that. And from my point of view, I couldn't give a stuff if they'd have broke the record. I mean, I didn't want us to lose a game, don't get me wrong, but for me, my hatred's at that red and white lot. My enjoyment was because of how much it meant to us to win that game.
Here. And I've got to say, last night, listen, if you can't enjoy beating Chelsea at home, and, you know, when can you enjoy it? I just think, generally, if you can't celebrate beating Chelsea, just celebrate that team performance. Celebrate, you know, the fact that Spurs are looking now like a real formidable team. And I can't remember being a Spurs fan at this time being so excited about what is to come for the future. We've got a squad here that is tied down. Fingers crossed Lamela, fingers crossed Alderweireld will get their deals done very shortly as well. And, you know, we've got a fantastic stadium to look forward to. I just think if you can't enjoy being a Spurs fan now and not celebrating games like last night, not just on the basis of the result, but on the performance, if you can't celebrate it, then what's the point, you know, of being a fan? What's the point of going to the games if you feel that that's an over-exuberant celebration? It was a fantastic performance. And I've got to say, White Hart Lane last night, it just really brings home how much we are going to miss this season, or maybe 2, hopefully not away. I mean, 2 losses in the last 27 home games, still unbeaten at White Hart Lane this season. That was, at the moment, the last ever scheduled midweek Premier League fixture at the Lane. Who knows if there will be any more fixture changes coming throughout the season, but a fantastic night at White Hart Lane. It really was, and such a special performance. Guys, we're going to move on to the listeners' questions just after this short break. So, as always, guys, we ask you to get in touch on the e-Spurs podcast with any questions you have for the panel on a weekly basis. You can do this by simply tweeting the e-Spurs Twitter account at @e_Spurs and simply asking your question with the hashtag at the end of e-Spurs pod. I'm going to come to you first tonight, Ian. We've got a question here from John Coote at Coote4, and he asks a very valid question. Where will Eric Lamela fit in when he comes back? Pochettino does not tend to opt with both Eriksen and Lamela at the same time and doesn't seem to be room for both. Would you go along with that? Is there a place for Eric Lamela in this Spurs side when he's back fit?
Well, I think that there is, because ultimately, you know, I think we've touched on it earlier on in the pod. We've got a lot of games coming up. We've got the FA Cup. We've got the Europa League games coming up. A packed league programme. And it's always nice to have different options for different styles of play. I definitely think that there's a space for him, and I fully expect him to feature in quite a few of the last remaining, 18 games?
Yeah, indeed. And I think a lot of people out there seem to overlook the loss of Lamela. I really do think the creativity he brings to this Spurs team and work rate alone, that should not be forgotten, and he will feel like, dare I say, a new signing when he comes back, because he has missed a huge chunk of the season, and fingers crossed we're going to get him back in a position where he will have a bit more time in the engine now to really get going for Spurs, because it's so frustrating. He was on a great run of form before he got injured. He's definitely a player that is improving, dare I say, game by game in the Tottenham shirt, and again, it'll be another fantastic option to have. A player, Jace, at the moment that is struggling for games, struggling to even see him on the bench at the moment. Jen Sky Clark asked the question, do you think we'll start seeing Nkudu playing in the Premier League and be able to see his ability? We haven't really seen what he's about yet, and it's the same with Clinton NG, when obviously we brought him in, didn't get game time, he ended up going out on loan. What's the future going to hold for Nkudu? Is he going to get a chance at this club?
Well, I certainly don't see him having too many Premier League games over the next few months. I mean, let's be fair, we've just had a question about Eric Lamela, and we're trying to fit Eric Lamela to come back in, and we've got Sissoko. We're trying to think, Sissoko's a little bit unlucky to have been left out of, say, the Watford game, and then Son.
Well, even Harry Winks, Jace. Harry Winks on the bench last night. Harry Winks, another one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't have a starting lineup with 16 players in it. As much as we might want to see certain players, there has to be a space for them. And if you think, okay, we got Aston Villa at this weekend, but I mean the next Premier League game, who in that side last night would you leave out even for Eric Lamela to come back in? So I certainly don't see anyone being left out for Nkudu, and maybe in a way the wing back system that we've started to play in some games, not all of them. So I think Nkudu is going to struggle. We may see him at the weekend, but even then I'd be surprised if he starts. I think we're more likely to see Son, Sissoko in the wider positions, and I think we'll go back to 4-2-3-1 on Sunday. So even then I don't think Nkudu's going to get it. But, like any player, when he gets a chance, he has to grab it. And as harsh as it was, the game at Liverpool for him, it was him that gave away the first goal, and with a Steven Gerrard style slip, if I remember rightly. So, but whether we'll see more of him over the next few years than NG, I don't know. I think, from what Lyle was saying, he was definitely bought with the future in mind. He came in knowing that was the case, and maybe next year you'll start to see him more regularly. But can't honestly see him, particularly if we're in a title race or in a top four race, having any impact in Premier League games this year.
Yeah, and you make a valid point there, Jace. We've got to try and fit other players also behind the pecking order, the likes of Heung-min Son, the likes of Mr. Sissoko, the likes of Harry Winks. It's not just Nkudu at the moment that he's struggling to kind of get a start, and it may just be a case that the FA Cup and possibly even the Europa League, that might be a potential avenue for him. I mean, you always want to see signings being given the chance to flourish, but I think the league we're in now, it's very hard to just throw a player in there and hope he performs. You have to go with the tried and tested, and that players, that have performed for you in the past, you want to be able to give them that platform again to play, to shine through. The next question tonight, Ian, is for you. This is from Whiskey Wizard at Whiskey Wizard 31, and he asks, if you could swap the form of one player from this season with their form from last season, who would it be? That's a cracking question.
Thanks, Whiskey. That's one of the toughest questions I've ever been asked
It's an
on
art-
this pod. Let me think.
I've got one. Moussa Dembele. That's not complaining at how Moussa Dembele's been this year, but he hasn't quite been at the level of his imperious best last year, and he constantly goes off after 70 minutes. We see it again yesterday. That Moussa Dembele last year was completely dictating games, and he was lasting up until the last couple of minutes of things. So I would say Moussa Dembele, purely because I think he's gone down from a 9 out of 10 player last year to a 7 out of 10 player this year, and that's not with any disrespect to what he's done this year, because I'm not disappointed with how he's playing at the moment, but I think there's been a 10% drop off in his game more than anyone else's.
It really just showed the kind of squad we've got and the way they can adapt very, very quickly to just changing a formation. I don't think people out there, should ever overlook that. That is an art in itself, to be able to have the squad, to be able to take on formations for different games. Conte last night is a team, they know, like I say, they're 13 games on a winning run. Spurs, like I say, they have to change their formation, which we've seen they've done numerous times this system, pick it up very, very quickly and just stick to it. And that's not saying that can be done overnight. This is something that Pochettino has really, really enforced on these players from day one. He's got a squad there that really does believe in the methods that he imposes. It is fantastic to see, it really, really is. Jace, going to come back to you. Question here from Derek Lafoste, at Derek Lafoste. He asks, with Spurs no longer being under the radar, will their performances continue, or will they show signs of pressure emerging?
We seem to be the least favoured of the 6 teams in terms of our overall ability and our overall credentials.
Even United, Jace? Even United, would you say?
Yeah, because Manchester United are absolutely on fire, having gone from 6th to 6th. but we're constantly told they're on great fire. We're constantly told they're Zlatan's having a fantastic season. They've scored about 10 goals less than we have. So
we're 14-1 at the moment, Jace. 14-1. Is it worth any money?
14-1. Maybe on a. Well, it's got to be worth £1, doesn't it? Surely, surely everyone's got a spare £1 to bet on it. No, we will be, I think, under the radar again at a certain stage of the season. I think there's some huge games. I mean, in terms of that title race, for me, it starts in March. All these are preliminary rounds. I think in the next 6 weeks, you've got a Liverpool playing Man United, you've got Liverpool playing Arsenal, you've got us going up to Anfield, we've got to go to Man City, you've got a Manchester derby, Arsenal going to Chelsea. There are still a huge number of games until that March period. And for me, the key thing is just to get to March and give us within, say we're 5 or 6 points off the top in March, then we'll take that, and then we'll really see when the pressure's cranked up for everyone. But obviously, of course, in amongst pressure, teams will go back into European competition, injuries and that kick in. There's so many things that can throw it up other than just pressure. But I think, as I say, I think West Brom will definitely be under pressure to perform against West Brom, because now the whole world is looking at us. But as I say, we only have to have a slip up with West Brom, say a home draw, and we'll be back out at the top. Exactly. And if we drop out the 4, everyone will be saying, there you go, that's typical Spursy thing. And all the negative ways that we're handled within the media will come to the front again.
I mean, that itself, like you just said there, that just stresses the importance of trying to build on that Chelsea result, as we said earlier, because it's all very well, like I say, putting in that kind of performance last night. But if you don't follow it up, like we didn't when we beat Man City and we went on that run, it really does put everything back into perspective again. And it is going to be this league, like we've seen with Chelsea, it is going to be the team that is the most consistent at the end of the day, which wins this Premier League. It's not a tough, it's not a hard thing to get your head around. The team that's most consistent will win it. The same with Leicester last season. They went on a run. They seem to, like I say, result week by week, take it game by game, get the results. And that's something that Spurs are going to have to try and do. 5 wins on the spin is fantastic. Can we now carry on the run and do it whilst under pressure? It's going to be a fascinating next couple of months. It really, really is, because having to try and handle this Europe on a Thursday back to a Sunday, although we've had the experience of it, it's not ideal. Guys, thank you very much for your questions as always. Like I said earlier, if you guys want to get in touch with us on a weekly basis and ask the panel here any questions, whether it be about the game we've just played, whether it be about transfers, whether it be about anything to do with Spurs, you can do that just by going to our Twitter at @e_Spurs, tweeting your question and ending it with the hashtag e-Spurs pod. So we're going to look forward to Aston Villa conscious of time, so we're going to do a quick preview of this one coming up. Jace, FA Cup, massive heritage with Spurs in the past. Question is, how serious are we going to take it, and how serious is it for you that Spurs try and go for this competition?
Well, as I've keep talking about, we need to win a trophy.
Yeah.
We need to get across the line and see some silverware. And you know, I think that the advantage that would give us, both from us, the respect that other teams would have, that tag of, oh, they always bottle the big occasion, would disappear. And I think you get a newfound respect from teams you come up against that, oh, right, you know, they really are going in the right direction. So for me, we need to win one. The Europa League, I think, is a huge one for us. And with the obvious riches it gives you if you do win it. But I think we'll take the FA Cup as seriously as our league position will allow us to do. That's not necessarily the way I want it to be, but we know from Pochettino, if we're in and around that league race, he's not going to play. You know, he'll leave 4 or 5 players out. I think Aston Villa at home certainly gives you a chance to leave, say, the majority of players that have played those 4 games. Let's be fair, if you saw Trippier, Davis, Wimmer, and maybe Toby, because I'm not so sure Toby actually needs a rest so much. He's missed enough football this year. You saw, I don't know, Dyer or Winks or whatever in midfield.
Sissoko, maybe.
Son, Sissoko, Janssen.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, that's got to be a good enough team to beat Aston Villa at home. And if they don't go out to Aston Villa, I wouldn't necessarily have a go at Pochettino for playing a weakened side. I'd think, well, those players have still got to be good enough and hungry enough. You know, they're players that want to play games. So when they get the chance, they have to grab it. So for me, I can see a team coming out like that on Sunday, and I think I expect us to fully beat Aston Villa. But you know, as I say, what type of team we'll pick, if it's Manchester United away or Liverpool away or Chelsea away in a cup tie, it will depend where we are in the league at the time.
And coming to you next, Ian, I think, not to try and put a downer on things, I think we have to be honest to say that Pochettino's cup selections in the past have been a cause for concern. I mean, there does seem to be this kind of intention to focus on the Premier League and trying to improve us year upon year, which no doubt he is doing. Just in terms of how important this competition is for you as a Spurs fan, where does this rank in terms of your priorities for a season?
As a Spurs fan, and personally, winning a cup has always been something that I've really enjoyed as a club. You know, as a supporter, I'm of a suitable vintage to remember the early 80s, early to mid 80s with a lot of fondness, and you know, 2 FA Cups and a UEFA Cup, all in the space of 3 years. We got a bit barren. It got a bit barren until the early 90s, and then it was even more barren until 2008. You know, and you know, there's nothing better as a group of supporters, and I always am envious of those people who were there that night when we beat Chelsea in 2008 for the old League Cup, because it's a trophy. You know, you get the players, and they've driven to get you there in a knockout competition, and they've lifted a piece of silverware.
Totally agree, and you made a good point there in terms of the selections. I mean, Aston Villa also at the moment, there's no doubt they are firmly fixed on trying to get into those playoff places themselves in the Championship. So, I mean, you may see some rotation from them, you know, along with Spurs. I do think Villa may also rotate. So it's going to be, I mean, you'd like to think Spurs will have enough in the locker to see this game out. Let's get some predictions. We'll come to you first. Jace, what are you going for?
I'll go 3-0 Tottenham.
Okay.
But you know, in amongst that, let's just remember Steve Bruce took Hull to Wembley, twice, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did indeed.
They're Hull. So Steve Bruce is actually one of those managers that, and in both those years, they were struggling relegation. So even then, he saw the importance. They may not take it as lightly just because they're pushing for a playoff, as we'll see. And the only other thing I'll say is, I think that stat is now over the last 34 years or 32 years or whatever, Justin Edinburgh is our most decorated player. And with no disrespect to Justin Edinburgh, I don't want Justin Edinburgh to be our most decorated player. You know, Come on, Ali, Lloris, they're the players that I want to see as decorated players.
Indeed. Coming to you next, Ian, what do you think?
I really don't want a midweek trip to Villa Park, much as I enjoy my away days.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, as much as I enjoy my away days, I'd rather not have them, because I've got a lot coming up with, you know, Sunderland away and City away. So, you know, I just want a 2-0 win, in the hat for the next round, and let's hope we can move on and progress through the competition.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I'm going to go for 3-0 Spurs. I think, Jace, like you've just touched upon it, this is, for me, in terms of where this ranks for me, Spurs, this team under Pochettino, need to be seen and need to be visualised as winners. And the only way you can do that is by winning a cup. And for me, that is really, for me, where Spurs are going to get some kind of fundamental recognition how much they have progressed, not just under Pochettino, but as a club. And let's be honest, I think it's nearly come up to 10 years, a decade without a trophy. Just isn't good enough for a club the size of Tottenham Hotspur. It really, really isn't. So important we do the job on Sunday. Let's get through to the next round, because I think, like Ian, you've touched upon, we've got some really, really big games coming up. We don't need any more fixture congestion in terms of replay. So let's put a team good enough out there to win the game. And, let's show the Cup some of the respect it deserves, because the teams we've got, even as a backup team, you would arguably suggest even that team is good enough, to see off Aston Villa. So, yeah, fingers crossed we can do that. I think, like I say, Spurs, we will hopefully, fingers crossed, go through. Guys, that only brings me to say thank you very much again for listening to us. Jace, thanks to you.
No problem, mate. Good to talk about an excellent win.
Indeed, indeed. And thanks to Ian.
Yeah, could I just also take this opportunity to wish all our listeners a very happy new year. Hope it's safe and it's prosperous for all of them, and for you two guys and John as well.
There you go. And likewise, we echo those sentiments. Guys, looking forward to Sunday. Thanks again for joining us. And come on, you Spurs!
No one can stop them.